Poliwag has been banned from Generation 1 ZU, folks. This is earth-shattering news. I don't know about you, but my day is ruined. What did Poliwag do to deserve this? What is the world coming to? Folks, if you don't know, ZU stands for Zero Used. And it is the lowest usage-based tier on Smogon. So the Pokemon here tend to be absolute weaklings that don't fit or do anything in any other tier. Gen 1 ZU is particularly weak in terms of power level. One of the top Pokemon in this format is Parasect. To give you an idea of what we're talking about here, Parasect is considered an elite choice here. Tentacool is also a popular Pokemon, not Tentacruel. Tentacool, the baby one. And so that explains what Poliwag was doing here in the first place. This is the Little League, and Poliwag seemed to be at home here, among his friends like Drowsy and Horsey. To be banished from ZU and ostracized from his social group is a serious punishment. So what did Poliwag do to deserve this? What did Poliwag actually do in this format? Well, folks, in this environment, Poliwag was actually one of the fastest things available, with a base 90 speed. Only two Pokemon are faster than Poliwag, Diglett and Voltorb. Other than that, Poliwag is outrunning most of the format. This made Poliwag a pretty good aggressive lead. And Poliwag had access to the incredible combination of high speed and a sleep-inflicting move. Hypnosis is an inaccurate sleep move with only 60 accuracy, but if it does land, it puts the enemy to sleep, and that is a huge advantage, especially on the very first turn of the game. Sleep in Gen 1 is even more powerful than it is in other games. There's little counterplay to it. There's no heal bell, there's no held items like Lumberry to cure the sleep. Getting put to sleep is just a guaranteed bad scenario for you. In fact, on the turn that you wake up, you also cannot act. Waking up from sleep consumes your action. So you can just continuously be put back to sleep without being able to do anything to the enemy. Sleep is incredibly powerful in Gen 1. So for that reason, a fast sleep setter immediately clicking Hypnosis can have incredible value, especially because Poliwag also has access to another powerful tool, the move Amnesia, a scarce option in Gen 1 and one of the best moves in the whole game. Amnesia simply raises your special stat by 2. If you aren't aware, in Gen 1 the special stat is 2 stats in one. It is special attack and special defense combined. So Amnesia is basically like a double Calm Mind. Raising your special stat increases the damage of your special attacks and also the resistance you have against enemy special attacks. It's an outstanding move, most famously abused on Mewtwo, but Poliwag is giving shades of Mewtwo here. But not even Mewtwo is the combination of a sleep move and Amnesia plus a good base speed. And this guy has a good special move pool to take advantage of its Amnesia boost. It has Blizzard, a great Ice-type special attack, which is 90 accuracy in Gen 1. Surf, of course, Hydro Pump. Psychic, which even on a non-psychic type is good for its 33% special drop chance. So you can certainly see why this is powerful. However, despite these amazing tools, Poliwag was considered an unreliable Pokemon to use in this format, because everything hinged on landing Hypnosis. If Poliwag fails to land this Hypnosis, it will probably just be a complete waste of a Pokemon and perish very quickly. It's kind of weak. It only has a 40 base special stat, its HP is low. Even by ZU standards, these stats are not very good defensively. So running a Poliwag lead is kind of a gamble. If you land the Hypnosis, it's amazing. You get a completely free turn to Amnesia up, you get Bulk and Firepower in one, you're fast, and you can probably KO 1 or 2 Pokemon if this goes well, if you get the Amnesia off. Remember, in Gen 1, Electric and Grass type moves can only be special. There's no physical moves of those types, and plus Grass type moves are scarce. So with an Amnesia boost, you're defending against the only real super effective damage you're worried about, which is electric moves. So Poliwag became known as a bit of a cheese Pokemon. If you bank on this 60% chance right off the bat, and it works out, you get an incredible reward. If it doesn't, you're at a disadvantage. Poliwag initially had good social standing in the ZU format, close friends with Drowsy and part of that social clique, but as his role became more pronounced in the format, Poliwag started to become a bit of a social outcast, seen as dishonorable. Poliwag's existence creates this frustrating coin flip at the very beginning of a game that you can't do much to stop. Sleep has little counterplay here, and if you get slept, there's not much you can do to prevent the damage you're about to suffer. Poliwag was not creating fun scenarios. Poliwag was bringing frustration and terror and uncertainty and chaos to Gen 1 ZU. And so the trial of Poliwag began. The entire community showed up to this important moment. All 15 of the Gen 1 ZU players showed up to participate in this ban, and only 3 individuals voted against banning Poliwag. Very little sympathy or support for Poliwag, and we don't know who these 3 individuals are. My theory would be that they were Drowsy, Horsey, and Tentacool. Even though these 3 were outspoken against Poliwag's actions, in the eyes of the public, I think that they still had some sympathy in their hearts for their old friend, and didn't want to see him go. But unfortunately, the majority rules here. The vote was in favor of banishing Poliwag, and now Poliwag is going to have to see how he fares in the PU metagame. He doesn't know anybody here, and he's considered a bit weak for the power level. Poliwag was a big fish in a small pond, and now in this new environment, with big scary Pokemon like Graveler and Nidoking to worry about, I think Poliwag is not going to have a fun time if I were to make a prediction. But that's how it went, and Gen 1 ZU will never be the same, for better or for worse. Now, a long time ago, folks, I made a video about Furret in the Generation 2 PU metagame. The topic of the video was how Furret was by far the most powerful force in this particular format. It was on every team, it was near unstoppable with few checks or responses, and as a result of that, Furret was banned from Generation 2 PU in shame. Now perhaps you'll also remember my Macago video, my famous video that I created in honor of the Year of the Fire Horse, Shinyanquaila, and in that video I discussed Macago in its debut game of Gen 2 and how the only thing it ever did was respond to Furret in Gen 2 PU, and after Furret was banned, Macago became useless. But then I was informed that I was wrong, that things have changed, and I didn't realize. Because at the time of that video, Furret had been unbanned from Generation 2 PU in an unprecedented move. Now, why would they unban Furret after it was so overpowered before? After all the damage it caused, after all the hearts it broke, they're gonna bring Furret back to Gen 2 PU? How does that make any sense? Well, it would seem the reason Furret was unbanned was due to tier shifts. A few things from the tier above, Gen 2 NU, fell down to Gen 2 PU. So now Gen 2 PU had a bunch of new faces in it and the meta was completely different. And therefore, they figured in this new environment, why don't they retest Furret, since perhaps now it won't be so overwhelming with all this new stuff here. Now you might be saying, Jimothy, how could you be so stupid to put forward the idea that Furret is banned from Gen 2 PU in your Macago video, your famous video, even though it wasn't banned? How could you be so stupid, Jimothy? Well, can I defend myself a little bit? Because it's sometimes difficult to be aware of these happenings. Nobody tells me these things, and when I look up information, it's often outdated. If you look up the Gen 2 PU viability rankings, they will still tell you that Furret is banned. It says it right here, Furret PUBL, illegal to use. That's outdated information. Furret is no longer illegal. This was last edited April 29th, 2025, folks. April 29th. It's an entire year ago. Now, to be fair, it does take a while for people to figure out the new viability rankings when significant tier shifts happen. But these tier shifts happen, I believe, back in January, and I have that information because of this tournament thread that I found, where a tournament was hosted following the tier shifts. But that's all I know, that's all I could find on this matter. I'm not saying you should have a ledger of every single thing that's ever happened in Gen 2 PU or other tiers. That would be a lot of work. But also, don't make fun of me if I didn't hear that Furret was banned. Don't insult me. I don't subscribe to the Furret newsletter, unfortunately. Such a thing doesn't exist. There's no Furret newsletter. And maybe it should. Maybe there should be a Furret newsletter to tell us exactly what's going on with Furret in every generation, in every context, at all times, updated daily. But anyway, Furret is now legal again in Gen 2 PU, and part of the reason for that is because Hitmonchan also got unbanned alongside it, a formerly banned Pokemon from Gen 2 PU, now legal again. And I think it's clear to see why Hitmonchan's presence would be an indirect nerf to Furret. 105 attack is actually decent even by higher tier standards, but for Gen 2 PU it's astronomically high. Incredible attack stat for the tier. And fighting type, of course, is super effective against normal type, which is bad news for Furret. Hitmonchan's presence certainly helps, but there's also New competition for Furret in the world of bulky normal types. In the past, Furret was the big one. There wasn't really anything comparable, but now stuff has dropped that is similar to Furret in nature, like Dunsparce. Dunsparce is now Gen 2 PU ranked, and this Pokemon is even better than Furret in the eyes of many. This guy has a 100 base HP, which for the Gen 2 PU power level is incredible. It may be slower than Furret, but the HP gives it so much more defensive longevity that Furret cannot match. And there is also Raticate. Raticate is a bit weaker defensively than Dunsparce and Furret, but Raticate is much faster with 97 base speed, and that speed is certainly relevant. So Raticate is another alternative that is a bit more aggressive. So with the rise of Hitmonchan to commonly threaten Furret, more normal types competing with Furret, and an increased incentive, I suppose, to run normal type checks like Omanite, Macargo, and Rhyhorn, especially Macargo, because it's considered an auspicious Pokemon to bring to a battle. It provides 100 years good luck. When you factor all that in, Furret no longer feels like the dominant, uncounterable force it once was. Even though some anti-Furreters like Elekid oppose this action based on historical contexts, most accept Furret's new place in the format, and the legalization of Furret has been a big shift for society. What it might mean for the future, who can say, but for now Furret is authorized and is considered a respectable member of society once again. Let's hope that holds for the future. Now folks, I had no idea about this, but apparently, in the Gen 3 NU tier, the Pokemon Glalie was incredibly controversial. I happen to be a Glalie fan, I like using it in Gen 3 OU, but I always thought in NU it was fine and balanced, and I never knew there was a problem, but apparently this has been a years-long controversy and debate, with Glalie at the center. The Pokemon did eventually end up getting banned from Gen 3 NU, and this was a big moment, because the meta had centered around Glalie for years, so to remove Glalie was a big upheaval, turning it into basically a completely new tier, which not everyone wanted. But regardless, what the hell was going on with Glalie in Gen 3 NU? Why was this considered the best Pokemon in this format? Glalie is a mono ice type with 80 base stats across the board. And for the power level of Gen 3 NU, these stats are pretty good and well-rounded. Glalie was the premier Spikes setter of Gen 3 NU as well. I think Spikes is the best move in the game in Gen 3, and it continues to be one of the best moves in the game today in modern Pokemon. They're an entry hazard that deal damage to the opponent every single time they switch in. Spikes are incredibly important. They restrict the enemy from switching. They deal incredible damage over time to opponents. And getting Spikes up is imperative. Glalie was the best Pokemon at getting Spikes up in Gen 3 NU. And Gen 3 NU is a format with limited Spikes counterplay. You have Hitmonchan, who is a popular Pokemon with access to Rapid Spin. There's Pinecone from PU and Wartortle, also from PU, that can still be used in NU. But the options are very limited here. Hitmonchan is the big one, but Glalie can outrun Hitmonchan and threaten it with Explosion for lethal force. The combination of Spikes and Explosion is extraordinarily powerful, especially because Explosion in Gen 3 will deny the enemy from taking a turn due to the self-KO. Glalie has a lot of effective bulk, and it would run Light Screen sometimes to survive incoming hits just to set more spikes from fire types and other things. Glalie also had access to some good offensive options. Earthquake is a big one, a high damage ground type attack that can threaten many of the Pokemon that try to KO Glalie, like Flareon or Metang. Earthquake does considerable damage to these guys. Basically, it was extremely difficult to stop Glalie from doing what it wanted to do. It would set at least a layer of spikes, and even one layer of spikes goes a long way. It would probably dish out some good damage to things, explode something, and trade up since it made a layer, probably eliminated something. And it's very difficult to come back from that momentum loss. Glalie was seen as mandatory on teams, or at least the best and most consistent team style. And if you weren't running Glalie, you were probably running a bunch of responses to Glalie, expecting it from the opponent. This was a bit of a divisive issue, though, folks. Although Glalie seemed to be over-centralizing and a bit metagame warping in an unhealthy way. Some were not so quick to want to ban it, as Glalie's central presence was part of the format for a long time, and sometimes formats are just centralized around one guy. That's just how they work. And this sort of centralization can be a good thing depending on the Pokemon. I think it's alright if there's a number one auto-include Pokemon, as long as that Pokemon is answerable by common things in the format, and itself has some set variety to at least create a bit of nuance in how it's used. Like Snorlax in Gen 2 or Primal Groudon in Gen 7 Ubers. Even though these Pokemon are auto-includes, they can be responded to by things that aren't that crazy to run, and also have a bit more nuance than some other examples of meta-warping Pokemon. Glalie, on the other hand, eventually was decided to be unhealthy. And they did actually host some tournaments without Glalie just to see what the meta looked like, and there was much discussion, but eventually it was decided that they should suspect the Pokemon, and most voted in majority to ban the Pokemon. Glalie was too good at doing what it did. It was kind of one-dimensional in what it did, and the metagame that it created was viewed as a little bit coin flippy, especially in a Glalie mirror match where you're both trying to do the same thing, and it might even come down to speed ties or other nonsense. I guess Glalie is sort of like Skarmory from Gen 3 or Ferrothorn from modern gens or something like that, but imagine if it was also fast and it could threaten all the things that might potentially rapid spin, and it could also explode, which denies them from taking a turn, and probably trades with them. If Ferrothorn or Skarmory could do that, they would probably be broken too. So relatively speaking, Glalie's even more powerful than them, and those are powerful Pokemon. So I suppose the decision made sense, and despite it being a huge upheaval that completely changed the format, they believed that it was necessary, and there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell that Glalie would be allowed to set foot back in Gen 3 and new. How terrible. It's not so bad though. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this is a usable Pokemon in Gen 3 OU for its uniquely valuable lead matchups, and the combination of Spikes and Explosion, as well as Taunt, even has value in OU. It's also viable in Gen 3 UU, so it's not as if Glalie has been erased from existence. It still has its merit in multiple different formats. I still like him also. I still think he's cool. This is a cool evil snowball with horns. It's an inspired design. Now, I have recently learned of a format that I've never heard of before called Do Not Use, or DNU, and I don't exactly understand how it works. The description of it reads as follows. DNU is a metagame composed of the worst Pokemon to have existed. By severely limiting the power level, it creates a metagame that feels very distinct from any other tier. And they say that we have been working to find the best of the worst since August 2022. So this is a bit unclear, but it seems as if Do Not Use is a custom curated format of what are perceived to be the worst Pokemon of all time, by somebody's opinion, which is certainly interesting. An attempt to deliberately create the lowest power level format possible. And the reason I have discovered the existence of this format is because I was informed that Taillow, the Pokemon Taillow, the little bird from Gen 3, was actually banned from the Do Not Use format. It was considered too powerful, so they do have strict requirements about how strong a Pokemon can be here if Taillow was banned. Before I figure out why the hell Taillow was banned and what it was doing, allow me to show you an example of a team in this format. We have this team right here, Venipede Normal Spam Hyper Offense, it's called, by Spice, the player Spice. Swinub is on the squad as a Stealth Rock setter. This might be the only format where Swinub is usable. I don't know if they even use that guy in Little Cup, I'm not so sure. Zigzagoon Galarian is on the team. We have Venipede, who is of course the title Pokemon, considered central to the archetype. Rockruff is on this? Rockruff. Hatena and Yungoos. This is almost just Little Cup, but I think even in Little Cup these guys aren't used, if I am correct. I don't know. I'm sorry, I cannot believe this. As I'm trying to figure out what was wrong with Taillow, it would seem that there was an insane amount of discourse about Badoo that preceded this. This is an extremely long and extensive post about all the reasons Badoo needs to be gone. I don't think they banned Badoo though. I didn't see that it was banned, but a lot of people wanted it gone. So Taillow seemed to be used in this format as a Guts Flame Orb Sweeper with Facade. It only has 55 attack, but I guess the power level is so low that Taillow is still powerful, and it does get a lot out of the incredible high power stab damage of Facade, plus the Flame Orb Guts boost. Plus it has the pivoting of U-turn, so it's a pretty nice breaker, it would seem. It has priority too with quick attack, like this was the common set on it. It seems that another option on Taillow was actually choice specs with Boom Burst, which is kind of crazy. 30 base special attack, but I suppose the power of Boom Burst makes up for it. I saw someone mention this in the thread at least. I don't know if this is actually true. When it comes to other special attack options, that has Heat Wave. It seems to have Hurricane, I suppose, is good. Don't say much else, to be honest, on a special set. It's Hurricane, and then you probably just chuck U-turn on for some form of pivoting. So this was what Taillow was up to. And when it comes to answers to Taillow, it would actually seem kind of limited. If you just search Steel in the builder, we got 3 Steel types in the whole tier. Diglett Alola, which is not going to cut it with a 30 defense. Meowth Galar could maybe help you out. And Beldum. Beldum's probably the best one. I don't know how good Beldum is, though. Its move pool is extremely limited. This is all it gets. It's Iron Head, Zen Headbutt, Iron Defense, Steel Beam. It's got Hold Back and Tackle. Famously terrible move pool on Beldum. Doesn't get stuff until it evolves, this guy. And apparently Knuckly was the best of the Taillow checks and a powerful Pokemon. This is the baby version of Garganical. 75 defense, I suppose, would be good. You resist normal. And you have Salt Cure. Do you? No, sorry, my mistake. Doesn't get Salt Cure until he evolves into a pyramid. For now, just a little Knuckly that looks a bit like a mushroom from Super Mario Brothers. Dare I say, but it looks a bit like a toad. No Salt Cure for this guy. What is it? Rock Slide, then. Recover. Toxic? No. Stealth Rock. Probably just something like this. Body Press. No, sorry. Yeah, what body with which to press? You're just a head. Of course no body press. What am I, stupid? Could run Curse, I suppose. Earthquake. Has a pretty good move pool. Is a physically defensive rock type with probably a Stealth Rock setter and a Taillow answer. But Taillow can, of course, U-turn out against this. Maybe besides this, there's not much else. So you could search for other rock types in the tier and see what else exists. Oh yeah, Rock Ruff is here, but Rock Ruff not as bulky as Knuckly. Only 40 base defense. Probably not going to handle a big stab facade very well. The Roggenrola could probably actually make something happen. I think Roggenrola could have what it takes to take on Taillow, but I don't know if people are using Roggenrola. 85 defense though. I would imagine it's also outclassed by Knuckly, but it could be a friend. And that seems to be it, man. That would seem to be literally all. Are there ghost types to speak of? I guess there's Bramblin, who can switch in on a Facade, but then what if they have Brave Bird? That will kill Bramblin. So Bramblin is scarcely going to help you. Well, 30 defense? Goodness. Never mind. Bramblin is not surviving the winter. Litwick is not... Litwick actually has 55 defense, which is not so bad in this world, at least. Litwick, I guess, could stop it, but I'm not so sure. Knuckly is probably the big one, but that would be like the only line of defense against Taillow. I can understand how a Stab Flame Orb Facade would kind of just go insane in this format. It does seem that there's very little that can actually respond to that in the world of Do Not Use. The Pokemon is also extremely fast. As you can see, the only thing outrunning it are Wiglet, Diglett, and Lovedisk. And I think that Taillow is really outclassing the damage output of all of these faster than it. A very good combination of speed and damage output for this format, it would seem. With Taillow, a little bird making a big splash in the world. Incredible. Now, if you were wondering who's next on the chopping block in Do Not Use, I'm sure you were. I'm sure you're very curious. It would seem that Curlier is considered problematic. I did not know Curlier's stats were this bad. Isn't Abra way better? That's crazy, actually. Curlier is a middle stage, but has really quite terrible stats. But I suppose 65 special attack is good for this format. And it has a good move pool. It has Trace, which is a great ability that copies the enemy's ability. It's got Trick, Choice Scarf combo. Choice Specs also. This seems to be the top special attacker of the format. It threatens Badoo. That's important, apparently. I'm learning that that's important. I'm learning it's important to threaten Badoo. And then you have Makuhita. These were the other ones suspected at the same time as Taillow. Or maybe it was a... Let's not spread misinformation. Was it a quick ban? Was this a council vote or was it a suspect? How do you even do a suspect on do not use? Okay, it was definitely a council vote. Sorry. Yeah, that was a council vote, wasn't it? Indeed. Sorry? No. No, they were voting on whether to suspect it or not. Okay, so suspect was an option. Now I understand. Now everything's becoming clear. Oh, they are going to suspect test Curlier. Curlier is on the chopping block. It evaded a quick ban. It evaded the fate of Taillow, who was just banished. But they will suspect test Curlier. Should I take part in the suspect test for do not use for Curlier? Should I do that? I've never heard of this format until today, but I might be interested now. I might have something to say about this. I might get involved. I have strong opinions about whether Curlier should be allowed or not. When will they do it and how? It's on this format is only available on the Dragon Heaven Pet Mod server, which hosts alternate formats, so I guess they'll do it there. However they'll do it, I might show up. I might try to get involved. But regardless, that's going to happen. And also Makuhita was on the chopping block. Is not going to get suspected though, but it was voted on by the council to either get quick banned or suspected, but nothing happened. Now Makuhita also seems to have guts. It has a high HP of 72, goodness gracious. And actually a great physical move. Well, I could see this being a pretty good bulky fighting type, but I can understand the Makuhita threat. But considered an honest Pokemon at the end of the day, and they did not ban it. I think I'm going to try this format, folks. I'm intrigued by it. And I would love to know more about how they select the Pokemon for it and all that. This is a whole new world to me, and I would like to understand more about it. I've been told also that Rattata is a Pokemon in the... Yeah, Rattata is here. And that intrigues me. That does intrigue me. Rattata is not powerful or broken, it would seem. The only thing I've seen in the thread about Rattata is everybody making fun of it and saying it's not even good. Not even good in do not use is quite an indictment, but I don't know. We'll see, folks. We'll see what Jimothy has to say about that. And the final interesting piece of low-tier news that I've found out about today, through rigorous research, is that Thwackey, the middle stage evolution of Rillaboom line, Thwackey, was a huge problem in the Gen 9 NU format and was recently banned from that format. Thwackey was the centerpiece behind some incredibly broken teams. Now, I've been talking about some pretty low power level formats today, so it might not sound that crazy to see that Thwackey was ranked in Gen 9 NU, but this is actually a pretty weak Pokemon stats-wise for Gen 9 NU. Just as a frame of reference, here are some other Gen 9 NU Pokemon that are not banned. Chandelure is one. Chandelure actually has really good stats. Great special attack of 145. This was almost a usable Pokemon in OU in the past. You also have Incineroar, who is a superstar of competitive doubles with pretty solid, well-rounded stats. And it's a scenario where apparently a fully evolved starter Pokemon Incineroar is perfectly legal to use, whereas Thwackey, a middle stage one, is banned, despite having worse stats. Kind of crazy. You also have Articuno Galar, is one of the top Pokemon of Gen 9 OU. Also a Pokemon with very good stats, it's literal legendary. So Thwackey being NU is kind of crazy. Its stats are really bad, actually. Even by the standards of Gen 9 NU. It only has 85 base attack, 80 speed, very weak defenses. But the whole reason Thwackey was broken was not even because of Thwackey itself, but purely because it sets grassy terrain on the field. That's literally it. And grassy terrain was so powerful and enabled such overpowered things that Thwackey itself was punished for it. Grassy terrain can be used to allow Pokemon to equip the Grassy Seed item. The Grassy Seed is immediately consumed and grants a +1 defense boost if grassy terrain is active. And this is an incredible item on Pokemon with the ability Unburden. This is a combo that was used in Gen 9 OU back when Sneasler was legal, and the combination of Rillaboom and Sneasler was incredibly overpowered there. So a miniature version of what happened back then is also something that has happened in Gen 9 NU with mini Rillaboom, Thwackey, enabling Grafaiai with a Grassy Seed, who is sort of like a mini Sneasler, I guess. Not quite, but it's similar. It's a poison-type physical attacker that uses Unburden to get an incredible boost. It actually has a good attack stat of 95, outruns absolutely everything, and can even Swords Dance up with the support of Terra and the defense boost to be incredibly overwhelming. This was the big one that was really powerful alongside Thwackey. Apparently it was really difficult to deal with. They even started running Throat Chop as a form of counterplay to phasing, because Roar is a move that can force Gruffii out of the field and erase its boosts and its unburdened speed, but Throat Chop prevents sound moves from being used, so it can stop Pokemon from roaring you out, actually. The guy also just gets Taunt to stop both Roar and Whirlwind, so it was very difficult to stop Gruffii in particular. Hitmonlee also existed, and was another potential unburdened sweeper, who has an even higher attack stat and an incredible stab close combat. With Unburdened, this is easily outrunning most everything, so Thwackey itself was not even that good. It's just because it sets grassy terrain on the field to enable an extraordinarily powerful combination on the Gruffii and the Hitmonlee that was the problem for Thwackey. So instead of banning these guys, the source of the problem was the grassy terrain that enabled these guys to be broken. Without grassy terrain, they're fine. But with grassy terrain, they're insane. So that is why they banned the middle stage Monkey from Gen 9 NU. Now, it's interesting because there are still technically some terrain users legal here. You got Pincurchin, who's ranked ZU, so you could theoretically use Pincurchin and an Electric Seed on Gruffii for the same synergy. There's also Indeedee, who is PUBL, which is just below NU, so it's legal too here. Between those two options, I would say Indeedee is the more promising one. This is even used in OU sometimes, actually. But I do see how Thwackey would be a bit better. Grassy terrain also has the benefit of the chip healing. Grassy terrain means Gruffii can stomach an Earthquake, because it nerfs the damage of Earthquake. And Thwackey itself, even though its stats are not that amazing, it does have Knockoff U-Turn and Grassy Glide, which has priority in grassy terrain. Thwackey can probably actually get more value than an Indeedee can in a game, who is sort of just a complete terrain merchant. Thwackey can at least remove an item and use some prio in an endgame or something. Thank you for listening to my urgent updates regarding lower tiers of Pokemon, folks. It's always fun to see what's going on in the more obscure Pokemon formats, and isn't it so cool that there's so many different ways to play this game? Worlds where Poliwag is a game-ending threat, I think that's fun. Forgive me if I got some minutiae wrong in this video. It's easy to miss nuance, especially for these more obscure formats. I've done my best to figure out exactly why these things are happening, based on the resources available to me, but I'm sure there's perspectives that I've missed out on. If you have anything to add to what I've said, please feel free in the comments. If you play these formats, I would love to hear about it. And thank you for watching to the end. You've received a special gift from Jim as a result of watching to the end. Goodness gracious, you've received the Ancient Crystal. And I would not just give anybody the Ancient Crystal. You have a destiny tied to this object that you don't know yet, but you will find out in time, okay? Take this Ancient Crystal. It's my prized possession. Take it, put it somewhere safe. Thank you for watching.